We're here in Las Vegas, Nevada, end of July 2011, and our guest this afternoon is Keith Lemons. And Keith, can you tell us a little bit about where you were born, raised, and your upbringing, that kind of thing?
Okay, let me start out with I'm a second-generation court reporter. I was born in Casper, Wyoming, raised in Wyoming and Colorado, and then went to school in Colorado for my court reporting, and then ended up back in Wyoming in about 1981. I've been reporting for 30 years this year.
What school did you go to in Mile High?
No, I went to that new school there called Denver Academy of Court Reporting.
Oh,
At the time it was new, and we were in our first building.
Typically one would be interested to know how someone got interested in court reporting, but I think you've already answered that question.
Not necessarily. It's kind of it's a different story. I was just getting ready to go on my honeymoon with my wife just before we got married. My dad sat me down and said, "What are you going to do with your life?" I said, "Well, at the time I wanted to be a music teacher." I said, "I'm going to teach music." He said, "Do you really want to teach music?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How long is that going to take you?" And I figured, well, another 7 or 8 years at least before I got my master's and possibly my doctorate in 12 years. He said, "How much are you going to make?" And I said, you know, about this X amount, $40,000, whatever it was back then. He said, "Well, if you were a court reporter, you could start out in 9 months," because he was a natural, "you can start out in 9 months and be making that much money as a court reporter." So,
Well, is that like a light going off for you?
well, I thought, I don't want to be a court reporter. I've seen how you work. But then we took a piece of paper and a pencil and we listed all the things that I liked, all the things I didn't like, and we matched them up with possible professions. And it came out to two. I either was going to be a lawyer or a court reporter, and I decided, well, why not? My dad was a natural, I should be. And guess what? I wasn't.
Didn't work that way.
I was one of the world's worst writers when I first started out. I couldn't, it took me about 3 years before I got to where I thought that I was actually competent to be a court reporter. So if any of you are watching this that I took those first 3 years ago, 27 years ago, I apologize profusely, but statute of limitations is passed.
Well said. Were there any classmates or people in the school that we would recognize the name of or that were sort of memorable in your mind?
Let me think. John Avery, maybe, from San Diego, California. His dad at the time owned the school.
Yes.
And John and I were probably he graduated about 2 years before I did.
Okay. You say that you probably at school were not gifted as a writer. Did you then sort of perfect your skill on the job, or did you just progressively get to the point where you felt a lot better about your skills? Or
I kind of had one of those low points in my life where I had, back then when we dictated everything, I had probably a 4-foot by 3-foot stack of notes that needed to be dictated and transcribed. And I was not that good at it, so I was okay at it. But back then, of course, if you took a tape recorder with you, then you were an absolute failure, so you couldn't have that. But I got to the point about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting up thinking I'm either going to get better or quit, and I decided I was going to get better. So from that time on, I decided I'm going to write every stroke perfectly. And it was a long time coming, but eventually I got to where my notes were pretty good.
did the advent of computer-aided transcription act as an inducement for you to write better notes?
It did. I started, CAT came out probably right about that time, actually, about 3 years when I started into it, when our company that I was with, Wyoming Reporting Service, back at the time, bought the first Barron centers, you know, the gigantic thing, looked like a desk that held a 2 megabyte disk that was this big, looked like a trash can lid. And at that point, I started getting excited about court reporting because you could look and see what you were doing wrong immediately without having to read back. It was great. I loved it.
Just as you were telling all these people about your apologies to some of your classmates,
yes.
Also tell them what personal and professional benefits that you've derived from your career in reporting.
Personal and professional benefits. Well, it's made me a lot of money over the years, and that's a very good benefit to have. Professionally, I've been all over this country and in Canada, giving seminars to court reporters and about telling them about court reporting and what good they can do and how they can be better professionals at it, and cheerleading the profession, teaching them about computers. I love what it's done for me over the years. I've been able to meet hundreds and hundreds of people that I genuinely admire, and I think that they're better people than me, and they're all in awe of me sometimes. It's like, I don't know why, but I'm in awe of them generally. But we have such good people that work in this business, and such the skills that they manifest are so wonderful, and sometimes they seem to forget that because they're the silent person. They're being taken for granted, and they shouldn't be.
Someone told me one time that a fish doesn't know that it's wet.
That's true, but can they drink water?
Voluntarily.
Okay.
What is giving you the most pride in being a reporter?
I guess the selfish thing I would have to say on that is my CRR. When I passed that one, I finally thought, okay, I've arrived. But it took me 15 years before I could get to that point, so, yeah.
By the way, you never would have met all those people if you had been teaching music, would you?
No, I wouldn't. I would have met a different class of strange people.
That's right.
So I know artists. I still sing, so I still do my music. I just don't get paid for it, but artists are stranger than court reporters, but about on par for the most part.
Looking back on the profession, either from what you have gleaned yourself or from what your dad ever told you, do you think that there ever was a time when it was the right time to be a reporter? In other words, do you think there was a golden era?
I've always thought as now is the golden era, no matter when it is, because we have so much to offer lawyers and the public for what we do as far as captioning live events, as far as real timing for our judges and for hard of hearing people. I think now is a golden age to be a court reporter, and I think that now is the time when we can, when the things that we can do are worth more than they've ever been worth, and we have more reason to shout out that we're the best out there because the things that they're comparing us to are abject failures.
So what are your greatest fears about the future of reporting?
My fear, and this probably is at this point in time, but it's been true for almost the last 12 years, I think, when we've had people have been doing the steno only versus whether we should have only people with steno or only people with steno mask, or we should allow some of them in or nobody in. Or my feeling is that there is no them and us. There's only us, and we are our worst enemy, and we've got to stop it. We need to stop doing that, or that's my fear. That pretty soon that house divided against itself is going to come crashing down, and I don't want to see that happen.
If that doesn't happen, describe the life of a reporter 10 years from now.
I think that even though these other methods of taking a record, and I say taking a record, not making a record, have made inroads into what we do, still the only person that can make the record is that human individual. And until I've seen what computers can do, and I know what kind of program they have to do to manufacture what they call artificial intelligence, and it's not really artificial and it's not really intelligent, and the computing power that they need to make it do what we can do is not there and won't be there for 10 years. So I see that the same kind of, we're going to have the same kind of opportunities and same kind of profession and professionalism in 10 years that we have now. I think that's truly the case. I don't think we're at that crossroads. I think maybe the association is, but I don't think the profession is.
So we'll still see a steno machine may have a different cover on it, but it will still be the primary means of making the record.
I think it will. I mean, even now we see people with pink machines and chartreuse ones and flames coming out the side, but I still think that the best professional to make that record is going to be the court reporter writing with his fingers, or her fingers, I should say.